Welcome to Go Behind the Ballot, a podcast where two Texas moms go on an educational quest to demystify Texas politics. Join me, Nichole Abshire, and my co-host Claire Campos O'Neill as we deep dive into the most burning issues, hear stories from candidates, and offer hope in these challenging political times. Let's saddle up and go behind the ballot.
Hey everyone, it's Claire and Nichole here. We have a super interesting episode for y'all. We just got done chatting with Subrin Yeager. She is an education advocate superstar. She was at the helm of starting 3 education advocacy groups. TAMSA, which stands for Texans Advocating for Meaningful Student Assessment. She also helped found Texas Educators Vote. And lastly, she's the director of Just Funded Texas. So she has such a wide knowledge of many of the facets that affect public education. Nichole, what did you think of this talk?
I feel like this is just something that I repeat every time, but I learned so much and she had so much to share and it was all so relevant and important. And I think what her particular strength is, and I know she actually has a presentation that she's working on called Connect the Dots, but I'm glad that she does because I think that best summarizes what she does, which is that she connects the dots because she's such an expert on all of the pieces, right, that affect public education in Texas. And so she really does pull from kind of all of the different pressures and the different data that she has studied and learned about. And she is such an expert. So
yes, she's been doing so much of this work. And I think she said she started in 2011. So she has this history of understanding what's been happening in the state. And I just really appreciate the work she's put into it because someone needs to be an advocate for students. And she is very much thinking of them at the forefront, which is wonderful. She also, in the end, talks about the importance of listening to our students and how they're so wise and we can learn so much from them. And sadly, their voices are left out of the conversation a lot of the time. But anyway, I hope you enjoy our conversation with Laura right now. Hi, Laura. We are excited to talk with you today. So can you start out with sharing us a little bit about your journey regarding education advocacy and just a little bit about you and your background?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. And thanks for doing this podcast. I think it's a great idea. I think people will really appreciate it. So I grew up in the Washington, D.C. area. I spent, essentially the first 30 years of my life there and on various other cities on the coasts and in other countries. And I moved to Austin in 1998. I had a 1-year-old. My husband was from Texas. I have now been here 24 years. And my background was I had done international trade policy. I was a government major. I studied international affairs and I did policy. I worked, in the federal government. I worked in the private sector. I worked with nonprofits. So I did a little bit of all of it. But I got here and had 3 kids that I was raising in Texas public schools. And so my interest started, it didn't dawn on me that my policy background would be relevant, but my oldest son was starting elementary school in kindergarten, and there was an issue where the PTA raised enough money to have a Spanish teacher in addition to all the other stuff they were teaching. And they raised enough money, the teachers actually voted it down, and this kid is now 25, this kid was in kindergarten. The teachers voted it down because there wasn't enough time in the day to have Spanish 20 minutes a day, twice a week, and prepare for the tax test. This was before STAR. But this is when I was like, what is that tax test? And little by little over the years, I saw this, extreme focus on high stakes standardized testing, what it was doing to learning and the kids. And so as I got more involved with the kids' schools, I saw an issue, and later, and we can talk about it more, it sort of led me into trying to figure out who did what and in our policy and how to make change to help all the kids, 5.5 million kids in Texas public schools.
Yeah. So were you in Austin this whole time that you've been in? Okay.
And the 3 kids went through Austin ISD public schools.
Interesting. I'm curious what happened with that money that didn't go to the Spanish teacher.
It got moved to the border. No, I'm sorry. That's really tacky.
There's other billions of dollars doing that. But we'll talk about that later.
Okay. Well, it's interesting, I think, as we're talking to folks who aren't elected officials but are in advocacy work, how it's one little incident that sort of, it's like looking under the rock and you're like, whoa, not that they don't like throw it down and walk away. They're like, I got to keep learning more and more and more. And it sounds like that's what happened with you with this particular incident regarding the funds for your child's school.
Can I add one thing to that?
Yes.
So, I mean, that was the first episode, but that same kid in 4th grade brought home their homework, and I noticed that this was a kid who was like loved learning, would go write books in his closet. I mean, it was just a kid bursting with love for going to school, and suddenly didn't like going to school. It was 4th grade, and he was bringing home either 100 or 50 on everything. And I remember looking, and I said, well, I don't understand. You got a 50, but all these questions are right. This was math. And he said, oh, no, it's not if it's right or wrong. It's if you can get 50 points if you do it right, but it's about if you circle and highlight and underline and do the test prep the way they were doing it. And he said, Mom, it doesn't make sense. They're making me memorize stupid stuff. It's not how I learn. And so little by little, I got more and more involved. And when that kid was in 9th grade, it was when legislation went into effect, just starting with the 9th graders, who were the class of 2015, where there would be 15 end of course exams to graduate, where they would be 15% in your grade, where you could not apply to a Texas school. So that's when TAMSA started. And so I had been building up over the years, and then all these, and we can talk more about TAMSA, but all these people came together, and it was just one grade. The kids that were older weren't affected by it yet, and it was just high school that really had these new high stakes put on them. So it was a real lesson in advocacy and in democracy and in civic engagement, and we learned a lot of lessons that I've carried through with all of the other, projects I've undertaken in the next, 15 years.
That's super fascinating.
Yeah.
Right. I went to Texas Public Schools, graduated from Texas Public Schools, but it was before the things that you're talking about. And then when I taught, the highest grade level I taught was 2nd. I avoided, testing years. And so my relationship with all of this is pretty much on the outskirts. So it's really interesting to hear it all from your point of view, because I haven't experienced it either as a teacher or a former student. So.
That is fortunate.
Yeah. Well, so why don't we go ahead and talk about TAMSA? Can you tell us about that organization, Texans Advocating for Meaningful Student Assessment? Right?
Yeah. And so we really started, it was right after the 2011 session when the legislation had been passed previously. Again, all these kids were the class of 2015. And I heard at a PTA meeting at Anderson High School that there was this new law. It was gonna really mess with the kids. The teachers were kind of freaked out. And across the state, they didn't know how to integrate it. And so what serendipitously came together was a journalist, a child psychiatrist, an attorney, a dispute resolution expert. I had a policy background, a school board member. And so we came together, and it ended up, this was an issue that superintendents and principals and teachers had been talking about forever at the legislature, but the parent voice had not been there. And we ended up starting this group. We were very thoughtful about the name. We were not against testing. We were for meaningful, engaging learning and diagnostic testing that would be of value to teachers and parents and students. And what happened was when we, some of the lessons we learned that we can talk about it and just fund it and other things, was we did our research and we said, first of all, we went to the school board and they said, we can't do anything. We said, well, who does? And so the attorneys went and talked to TEA, and that sort of got things bustling a little bit. And then we said, well, the legislature makes these laws. So we then did our research about what happens in other states across the country, what the requirements were federally, where these decisions were made. And we went and did white papers and presentations and met with parents across the state who sort of sighed this collective relief that somebody was helping them understand what was required, what we were doing, where it was in the context of what other states were doing. And we were so much farther above and beyond in high stakes standardized testing. It all started in Texas, and we were, leading, and we still are a little bit. And then we educated people, we engaged them, And then we empowered them to advocate. People came to the Capitol. They called and called and called, so Governor Perry would not veto the legislation that brought it from 15 end-of-course exams down to 5, that took it out of the grades. I mean, everyone told us it would take decades. And we, in that one session, got it done. And then subsequently, there's been little bitty more we've done each time, the individual graduation committees. But it's a tough road. I mean, people make a lot of money off that. It was not easy, but it was one time when democracy really, I feel like, triumphed. And when House Bill 5 passed, which incorporated those changes, everyone in the aisle, from the Senate, for example, from Wendy Davis to Dan Patrick, all wanted to be in the picture with us when that bill was signed. So I'm not sure they all would still, but it was really interesting. And then just one thing I will add in terms of sort of tying it back, growing up in DC, I was surrounded by people who were civil servants, who were experts in their field. My dad was a labor lawyer. My mom did, PR for hotels. We we didn't do political stuff. I stayed away from Capitol Hill. It seemed unseemly. I didn't want to deal with that. But, those people make decisions. So you can know your stuff, all there is, but unless you have any interaction with the people who are making the decisions, it's really hard to get big changes. So right. I learned that lesson coming to Texas.
Yeah. Okay. As you were talking, it was making me think, can you just catch us up to speed a little bit on the history? So was it in 2011 that the high stakes testing really kicked into gear, and that's when y'all started to push back against it, or was it a different time?
So from when it started in around 2000, when No Child Left Behind started, when, it was started with George Bush here, they ratcheted it up. It started with basic tests. Then there were basic tests with stakes attached. Then it became more of the accountability system. So I have a chart I can show you that it got more and more invasive and more being used for more and more things. And then the high stakes on students, I'd have to go back and look. But that 15 and in your grades, I mean, it's insane. They went too far and it woke people up. And so once parents started making noise, we got some feedback oh, no, shh, we'll give you the 15%, we'll take it out of grades, but shh. But the sort of giant had been awakened. And parents were like, no, we've looked and this whole thing is messed up. We need to change things. So, and the high stakes, I will give you an example. So there are requirements, it's no longer No Child Left Behind. It's the Every Student Succeeds Act. ESSA now oversees, accountability. And there are requirements every year from 3rd to 8th grade. You need to read an English and a math test. No requirement anyone pass. It's a reporting requirement. And then once English, math, and science in high school, and then science once in elementary, once in middle. We have more tests than are required by federal law. And when TAMSA started, there were probably 27 states, and we had a whole handout on this, that required tests to be passed for kids to graduate. It's down to 10, but we still have them. It's clearly moving away from that. The same as colleges are seeing that there is racial and economic bias in standardized tests. There is a value. We don't want people to be, there was a reason. I'm going to give people the benefit of the doubt that there was, that we weren't shining a light and seeing where there were kids being left behind, right? I see a point in disaggregating data and looking and seeing what the issues were, but the problem is, I think the goal was to shine a light and provide resources. And we've sort of flipped it on its head, and we've used this as a punishable offense, and we take away resources and close schools. Kids who have some of the greatest needs, often, how kids do on these tests really does follow along with economic income often, and they lose recess and they lose electives and they get more tutoring, and that's not what makes kids want to go to school. And there's lots of data showing it's fueling the school to prison pipeline. So valuable diagnostic tests. And for me, I think it's all about meaningful, engaging learning for kids. So, but there was a hearing yesterday.
Yeah.
And it was it was disappointing, I will say, because pretty much every single person invited, save one, was from the test and punish approach.
Oh no! Why do we have this? What's the logic behind that approach?
Well,
and then can you also, just for people who really are a little unclear, what you mean by test and punish?
So I'm gonna answer Claire's question first. I think what's hard is I feel like a lot of education reform, and I'm putting it in quotes for those of you who can't see, a lot of people think you can get to equity just through testing. And there's a strong component of that from people in the business community. And I think it's misguided. I believe our public schools were created as a public good to enrich and engage and raise human beings to be who they were meant to be, and really nourish their gifts. But I think a business model looks at, carrots and sticks. And, it's the same model that said we should pay the teachers more if they can get the kids back to school, as if teachers weren't trying to get kids back to school. It's the same model that says we should have outcomes-based funding and pay more if kids do better on tests. It's the same model that really thinks people are motivated only by money, which is not why teachers teach, and which is not what gets kids excited to learn. And I think it's also part of a long-term plan to privatize public schools. I'm just going to come out there and say it.
Right. I mean, you're not the only one, as we've been having these conversations.
Yeah, this is a recurring theme, that's for sure.
Yes, it seems like that's the through line, and that's the end goal we're hearing some people have with public education in Texas. I'm not sure how it is with other states. Are other states doing it differently, like not this carrot stick model, and doing it well?
Well, none of the groups I'm a part of are partisan or political, and public education should be an apolitical. In Texas, we've avoided a lot of the, privatization schemes that have come in other more conservative states because rural Republicans and urban Democrats have worked together. I mean, public ed is the public schools are the center of communities, especially in small rural communities. The football game, it's the number one employer. So we've resisted a lot of more conservative states have vouchers, which they're going to push again this session. Our charters have grown enormously. And I looked at some data recently to show that, the amount of money we're spending on those is triple what it was, even though we can come back to some of the data, and I can send you a lot of things. This is a nationwide push. And if you go back and look and see, Brown versus Board of Education took place in, was it 1954? And in 1955, Milton Friedman floated the first idea of vouchers. It is not unrelated.
Yes. It makes me think of this book I have over here, Democracy in Chains. Have you read it? And it sort of explains public education in the United States. And I was like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Connecting the dots.
It's connecting the dots, and I am working on a connecting the dots presentation that ties all of this together. But I mean, the way you privatize, you underfund, you make things not work, you make people mad, and little by little you sell stuff off. Yeah. And I would say we'll talk about underfunding, which we are at the bottom of the barrel in funding our schools. Through the testing and accountability system, we're making things not work. Teachers don't want to teach that way. Kids don't want to learn that way. We're putting a scarlet letter on them with our A through F system, and then we're ramping up the charters, and we got some strong incumbents and candidates pushing for vouchers. So
yeah, if you're looking at a broken system, of course, you want to just, give it that final little push, tear it down, and hey, here comes somebody with a rescue plan
and it's a lot of money.
Looks different.
Ugh. Yeah. Well, let's take a little bit of a step back. I'm just curious because TAMSA stands for Texans Advocating for Meaningful Student Assessment. And when I hear assessment and accountability, I sometimes put them together. Can you separate them for us and tell us the difference between assessment and accountability?
Mm-hmm. Yes, and they should be different. We have conflated them in Texas, I would say, because our accountability system is all based on assessment. So assessment is just testing. Teachers do assessment all day or, all the time. And, so there are local assessments. There are different kinds of assessments. And I'm not going to get into, testing. Assessment is a testing. Accountability is, you give this. So accountability, I kind of think we're doing it backwards. Accountability is making sure you get what you want when you give someone something. I think that's my very lame interpretation. So I feel like the taxpayers should look at the legislature and say, we're giving you all this money. Are you giving us what we want? It's not really how it's happening. What that is the state saying we're spending billions of dollars on public schools. You need to show us your report card. You need to show us what you're doing with that money. And the way we're going to look at it is stuff that's countable, right? Which is standardized testing.
Test scores, yeah.
Uh-huh. And there are different models of accountability, and ESSA opened it up, but, they encouraged states to have accountability systems that were not just test focused. But what Texas did was they took the opportunity then just to say, well, we'll just have the federal accountability match with what we're already doing at the state. And so our accountability system, it is an A through F system, which has been pushed predominantly in conservative states. It had passed in Virginia once, and the realtors saw what it was doing to their home values, and they got rid of it, right?
Yes. I'm a real estate, I'm sort of a real estate agent. I don't do a lot of real estate. But yes, the school rating is so integral to the price of your home. And I live out here in Del Valley, which historically was not rated well. And people were like, it's not a good district. And I'm like, based on what? Have you gone to the schools? Have you talked to the teachers? Have you talked to the administrators? Have you toured? They're wonderful. I love them. I'm so supportive.
So that's one thing that is interesting. So our accountability system in K through 8 is just based on STAR, right? Or 3 through 8, just based on STAR. And in high school, it's got a few other measures. Most of them are still STAR related. It's slicing and dicing things differently. But you could throw in the SAT scores, and you can do, a little other stuff, but it's predominantly that. But just to give an example, you don't have to make any schools fail. To me, the goal of an accountability system is to say we want everyone to thrive. We want kids to do well, we want schools to do well, and we want districts to do well. But we have this they're pushing this scarcity model that some have to do good and some have to do bad. So when they tried at one point, and I'm on the APAC committee, Accountability Policy Advisory Committee for the state, where we advise the commissioner on how to interpret the accountability laws. He doesn't have to listen to us. I'll just leave it at that. But they said, well, what if in the lower grades we included another measure? So just to give you an example, they said, let's do attendance, right? So they looked at the attendance numbers. And in elementary schools, kids generally go to school. So the averages were from, let's say, 95 to 100%. So what they did, instead of saying, great, everyone gets bumped up, they made 95 an F. And they made 100 an A. So 97 was a C. So all the elementary schools got really bad ratings. So to me, that is not seeing how we're doing. That is pulling numbers on a number line, which is what we do with standardized tests because we want winners and losers. And the country, the federal government does need you to report the lowest 5%, but the lowest 5% could be a B if they're all doing well. We think that means, I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
So much for silent now. We think that means we need to make the lowest 5% an F or more. So
yes,
there's a lot of power in what TEA can do and how they can interpret the laws, and that grows every time. So that one example shows you that this is about norming things and making winners and losers, which then fuels that system.
This is reminding me, Nichole, of our conversation with Dr. Telly.
Dr. Telly, I knew you were going to say it 100%.
She was talking about, the way that the ratings come out. And it's not about lifting all the kids up. It's about having kids perform really, really high instead of everyone just being where they should be grade level wise, and how this is, I'm probably not explaining it well, but the system just isn't, like you said, it's about scarcity, winners and losers, not let's make sure all our children are being educated and thriving.
It's a good
hard to hear.
For the Dr. Tully episode, because it also reminds me of the unintended consequences conversation, that she seems to have made it her mission to point out these unintended consequences. Because I guess if you are, I'm going to assume the best, right? Kind of what you did, Laura, earlier, which is give grace, which is that if you aren't aware of the systems that you set up, and when you set it up that way, what the consequences are, then you're going to keep moving forward with that same model. Right. So, oh boy.
Can I give one other example of that? So
yes,
that's
please.
With accountability, but with the tests, for example, and I learned this from John Tanner, who's brilliant, who you might want to have on at some point too. He's an expert on accountability, but the way he explained it was like, I think of a test. I think of it like a teacher. Like, let's say it's physics. I was bad at physics. So, right. But I might get the first question right. Like let's say it's on a chapter, maybe the first half of the chapter I'd understand. So maybe I think I'd get a 50 on my test. But what they do is they put out the sample questions and they do the field testing. And the questions, I think it was, 70 or 80% of kids. If there's a question that 70 or 80% of kids are going to get right, they won't put it on the test. And if there's a question that 70 or 80% of the kids are going to get wrong, they won't put it on the test. They want questions that like half and half are going to be, so they will spread more over your number line. So they're not actually testing to see if you understand the material. They're looking, again, to sort. This is all about sorting. So I get it if you want to sort for your accountability system and say which ones are doing the best and the worst, but to tell kids they can graduate or not graduate based on stuff that's pulling out things that really, maybe you understand the vast proportion of the material, that's not fair, and it's not honest to parents and teachers on what we're testing. So,
when you say they, do you mean like the test takers or TEA? Like, who's the they that is doing this?
So there's a whole industry. There's a whole career called psychometrician. They're test makers. There's a whole field, and every district has psychometricians as well. And TEA is full of psychometricians. Like, that's how you make a test. That's how you make a standardized test. That's how you differentiate one kid from another. And I get it, but we're seeing, are they doing well? And it's not. Are you doing better or worse than someone else? And it may be that someone's doing better than someone else, but if they're all doing well, yay us.
Right.
Yay teachers, especially given how little funding we have, right? So I just feel like it's being set up to give a narrative that we're failing, which they've been pushing since the Reagan era, right?
Yeah. The other emphasis that just really jumps out is that the emphasis seems to be on being a skilled test taker. I think I said
like
test.
Your son and
test
that
taker, and not at all looking at the quality of the questions and are they measuring what kids have been taught and what we hope that they are learning. It is about the question itself, the question design, which isn't like, we don't need to test the effectiveness of the question. It's not coming out right. My brain knows what I'm thinking, but do you know what I mean? I feel like actually what you're talking about is they're measuring the psychometricians that you talked about, and can they design a question that's a little bit tricky? Mm-hmm. Or are we testing kids and what they are actually learning and how it moves them forward as a learner? And yes,
that totally makes sense. And what it does on top of it is, if you want to talk about equity, almost every one of these tests is testing reading, right? They're testing language, they're testing reading. So when we look at the tests at the high school level, there are 5 that you have to pass to graduate when there are only 3 required to be given in high school to start with. And there are these individual graduation committees that we and others push that are there that maybe you can use for if you fail 2, right? But the 2 that get failed the most are English 2 and social studies. And the kids that fail the most are suffering from dyslexia or English language learners, or I think we should say emerging bilinguals. These are kids that may be brilliant in the subject.
I have a dyslexic student.
Yes. And there are kids in dual language who are so much better equipped to be members of our society and brilliant in the workforce. But when you test them in third grade, for example, they're like 2/3 of the way in English and in whatever other language they speak. Mm-hmm. And they do really badly on the reading test, and then they get pulled out of dual language because it's all about the test scores.
Oh, no.
It's not fueling good practice. And so on those APAC committee meetings, I raise my hand and say, you're pushing policies that are forcing educators to make decisions that are not in the best interest of children. I just feel like that's my job, to raise my hand and say that.
Well, we're thankful you do that, because we need voices like that.
Yes.
It's not getting us that far, but I do, I'll say it over and over.
At least there's that voice in the room, because I'm sure if there's not, they just assume we're all good.
Two things are really jumping out at me right just in this moment. There's 1,000 things overall, but is that, yes, we're so grateful that you are that voice in the room, and also that you're shining light on these issues. The way that you just described how questions are chosen and the way that you described the attendance thing was just mind-blowing. And I can see how those particular things could really just become so accepted that nobody would even think to stop and question. So shining a light, thank you, and being a voice, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I know this is going to take a long time to, I think, let it soak in.
Yeah, I don't know why I keep thinking about this, but I keep thinking about the idea of form and function, and the form of the test isn't enhancing the function of really assessing children, it sounds like. And it's why is our form so messed up? That bothers me a lot.
So, I have raised with, Commissioner Morath and others, there is a system, there's a group of, there's a consortium, it's the what's it called? New York Performance Standards Consortium. It's a group of maybe 20 or 30 schools. It started in Brooklyn and one of the other boroughs in New York City, where they got an exemption from the state regents exams. They still have to do some, but they got an exemption. And it is meaningful, engaging, project-based learning, portfolio method. Kids are doing projects that bring in science and social studies. They're writing and they're reading, and there's a math element, and they're working with their communities. They are partnering with businesses and nonprofits. And these are kids in communities that often were not having college-going kids or success in postgraduate work, post-high school work. They're doing fantastic. And I've said, why can't we do that? And I will say that's one of the few things that the commissioner and I agree on. He's like, oh yeah, no, that's the ideal, but that costs a lot.
Oh, okay.
So maybe we should talk about money.
There's our segue.
And do you want me to tell you real quickly, how I got from the TAMSA onto these other?
Yes, that'd be great. Was it TAMSA first, and then you ended up getting into the other groups?
Yeah. So again, I was here. I had 3 little kids. I got involved. I was involved with their schools. I was working part-time, and I, sort of accidentally got involved with education policy, and it's a different topic, but I learned sort of how it worked. But then I went and worked for an association called TAX, ironically, and that represented the superintendents in all the small school districts. And I was on their government relations team, but I basically listened to all the hearings, the Senate and the House education hearings, and reported back to the 970 superintendents of the small school districts. And that's when I was like, oh, the assessment and the accountability. Oh, and that's kind of related to the funding. And oh, some of the teacher issues, and all this stuff sort of fit together to me because I was watching not just the assessment hearings, right? Mm-hmm. And so
the full picture.
After the 2015 session, I think I worked with them for a couple sessions. I went and listened to Harvey Kronberg from the Quorum Report talk about voting, and he said that Texas was at that point last in voter turnout, and the Annette Strauss Institute does studies, and Texas always is last in political discussion. And I went back to work and said, well, what if we were to focus on getting people to vote? Just to vote. Let's try to create a culture of voting so that when these kids grow up, Texas isn't last in voting, because I'm all about democracy. So that's when I started Texas Educators Vote, which now has 31 partners, where I just generate messages about this is how you register, research, and vote. and model that for kids. So that was sort of the next thing. I run that still. And then in 2018, when my youngest the oldest was like finishing college and the next one was off in college, and the youngest was a junior at McCallum High School here. And she came home and said, Mom, people are freaking out. Kids are crying in the hall. Parents are up in arms. Austin ISD had a budget deficit of $30 million. And there were these budget stabilization task force meetings where they were trying to figure out what to do, and everything was on the table. And one of the things on the table was maybe getting rid of the Fine Arts Academy, which is a greatly beloved institution here in Austin ISD, and a fantastic, just warm, nurture, just an awesome place. I love McCallum. And so that's when I got put together with Allison Alter, who is a city council member, and Janice Bookout, who heads Earth Day Austin. We all had kids at McCallum. And we said, well, and to me, I was sort of pulling on my TAMSA model, like, let's do the research for the people, let's educate them and engage them. And so we had an offshoot meeting at McCallum where 200 parents showed up.
Wow.
And we said, this is how school funding works. We're heading into the 2018 legislative session, or the 2019 session. We had just had an election. People voted. They voted, educators voted like never before. There was a big issue with school funding. And we said, look, you can be mad at AISD for whatever reason, plenty of reasons, but this is about the state. And so we educated them on how school funding works. And then ultimately, I worked with different partners that I knew through my public education advocacy to grow this into a statewide organization of parents and students advocating for funding our schools. So that's where Just Fund It came from.
So regarding funding, Mike Morath is like, we could have these amazing models, but we don't have the money. Why don't we have more money? Why don't we put more money into public education? Do we put enough money in? I guess we should start with asking. I'm assuming no. But
we've seen the data.
Yeah.
We're in the low end, the way low end.
Can you just talk to us about funding in general and why we just don't have enough money for the nice things that we want and really the students want and the communities want? What's happening?
So, we do spend a lot on public ed, but we have 11% of the country's children. There are 5.5 million kids, right? I just looked at the data, the quality count survey that Education Week does, the most recent school funding one they did last June, had us, it ranks us, I think, 4 years ago we were 43rd, maybe we're 42nd or 41st. But if you actually look, and these are, this data is looking at inflation and sort of averaging out the cost of living different places. If you actually look at spending, we're 49th per kid.
Whoa.
The only ones lower are Utah and Arizona. The national average is $4,300 more per kid than Texas is spending. So the national average, when we went into 2019 and before House Bill 3, when they added like $6 billion, right? They added maybe $5 billion in property tax too, relief, but just in funding the schools, they added some, but the national average went up and all the other states did too. We really almost just dug ourselves out of the cuts we had made in 2011. So while I appreciate that the state, without a lawsuit, a judge ruling that they had to put more in, they did put more in. But we're still at the bottom of the barrel. And we are still at 68% of the national average. We're doing well in all the measures, given that we so poorly fund them. The only thing that costs more, I think, is healthcare, which has surpassed public ed. But it costs something. And there's a good article that Ray Perryman, the Texas economist, wrote saying that it is the single best investment. Public education, it comes back 50-fold. There's no other investment that comes back 50-fold. But it does make you wonder the hesitancy of our elected leaders. I think it's political. I think Vicki Goodwin, who you interviewed before, said it very diplomatically to say, we have a conservative legislature that does not like to spend. But I will add, and then I'll be quiet and wait for your next question, that the comptroller spoke to the legislature, both to the Senate and the House Finance and Appropriations Committees just a few weeks ago, and said, we are rolling in the dough. He said, we have $27 billion extra dollars. It is like Christmas every day. Wow. We should invest in infrastructure, and public education is part of infrastructure. Sadly, what I saw from the Senate Finance Committee was horror. Like, people will get used to having things.
Yeah, like, what are you saving this money for? Like, you can't take it with you when you're gone. You can't, I mean, if you're in that position, spend the money if there's money.
Tax
and someone's
relief.
telling you.
Tax relief. I don't know. I mean, it does make you want to, I mean, I don't know. I'm not going to go somewhere you can go. But I mean, if you want to look at who's in our public schools, I don't know.
Yeah. Well,
people need to vote.
We're being diplomatic, and that is.
I'm going to keep my big mouth closed on some, assumptions I could make.
Well, you know what we're here to do is lay the groundwork and let people draw their own conclusions.
Yes.
So groundwork is being laid.
Exactly.
Right.
So I want to circle back because we've heard a lot about this in our discussions in our education series about the basic allotment. How is this even determined for students?
So the basic allotment is like just the very bottom building block that every kid gets. And it's like, I don't even know, 6, 7. I mean, it's not the, right now, if you look, the average per kid is $9,369 in Texas. And nationwide, it's $13,679. Okay. But the basic allotment is this basic amount. And there are other people you can talk to who are school finance experts. But on top of that, you get a certain amount if you are an English language learner. You get an extra amount if you're an at-risk student. You get an extra amount if you have, they just added dyslexia. That was new. There's a special ed amount. And some of those funds do come from the federal government. 92% of funding is state and local put together. A very small percent is federal dollars, and that comes through Title I, right? So there are formulas that have not been updated since like 1980 something. And so each kid carries a different weight, but the basic allotment is the very basic building block.
Okay.
But it's lower than the average amount because kids get added on for different things.
Okay.
Sorry, that may not be super clear.
No, I feel like, Claire, I don't know if I'm reading your mind, but I feel like maybe like what's underneath what you're asking is how in the world did they come to that number, and why is that the one we're using as the basis? And it seems like maybe we just kind of arrived here. So what's hard is the legislature is hesitant to add a bunch because it's a 2-year legislature. It's a 2-year thing. So like they can put something in, but they could take it back out. And so they always say, well, no, we don't want to make decisions that are going to affect future legislatures when we're not here. But that gets into, and if you want to talk about, how the local property taxes like funnel in, but let's see if I can figure out where I was going on this.
It's okay.
I would think what would be a great thing to do, which they did 20, 30 years ago, was a cost of education. Like if we wanted to be the gold standard, or even the silver or the bronze or whatever, but if we wanted to provide what we really thought kids needed to have a great education and be one of the best, that would be a cost of education study. They haven't done it because they're going to find it's going to cost a lot more than they're spending. And when you even look at, like, Texas likes to be number 1. So when I say we're 43rd, 41st, 49th, to be at the national average, just to give you an example, it would cost $47 billion this biennium.
Wow.
To be at the national average.
To be average. To be 25th, right? They don't have that, but we do need to continually get closer. And so what I was going to say is maybe 30 years ago, they did do this study, And what they did then was they didn't put that much in. For that time, they said this is the cost to educate. And I don't know if they gave a quarter, a third. They gave some fraction of it. So we never have fully funded it. It costs a lot. But if you do look and see that our kids are the future of the state, even if you don't just discount it as they are humans who deserve to be invested in, but if you just want to look at it as what you're going to get back, we should be funding it. And we do have the money, I will say. And I will add that we got a lot of money in federal money. And one thing that Just Fund It did last time was we had to fight to get a penny of that money. $15 billion ended up going to our public schools. And we had to work with some people in Congress to understand what Texas was doing with the money, because the people in charge did not want to pass that money along to our school districts, and we were not getting a full story of what was happening with the first couple rounds of COVID relief dollars.
Right.
And so that's when you talk to advocates, listen to the people in charge, but look outside, see what other places are doing, and get more information, because sometimes it benefits people not to tell you when they are in power and they have all the power and they don't want to do what you think is right. So I'm going to give a personal shout out to Lloyd Doggett's office for helping us understand what was going on with federal dollars in other states and in our own.
Yes. The thing I keep thinking is, one, it's incredible what Texas is doing considering how little they have. Man, are we resourceful? And number two, if we have all this money, the money, what do you do with money? You spend it, you invest. So if some voices are saying this is not the thing we want to put our money in, I'm like, well, then for what? What's better to you than education, than investing in our students? I can't, as a mother, as a community member, I can't think of what would be a more noble thing than education. So for me, this is a little challenging. Come on, guys, this is the thing.
So one argument they give, those billions of federal dollars, they were like, well, the districts are going to get them, but then they're going to go away and they're going to look to us to match that, right? The same with this money that's in the pot now, ongoing costs. So that's their worry, is people will get used to
nice things,
to having things. And the people that are electing them are not fans of paying taxes. I'm just going to say, a lot of the people move to Texas because they don't pay so many taxes, which I guess is good if you're a business, but at a certain point, you want roads, you want educated people, you want infrastructure. I think it's going to come back and bite them in the butt, honestly. And we do have high property taxes because we've chosen not to have other taxes. And there are other ways to raise money that no one will discuss, at least who's in charge now.
Yeah.
That's such an important point. Yeah, because what we're talking about, from my point of view, opinion moment, is completely unsustainable, right? At some point, this is going to burn out. If we keep going in this direction, if we don't make different choices and decisions, there's no way long term that this model can sustain and keep this state thriving. It's just not possible.
And so can I say, to me then, when I look and see how few people vote in the state of Texas, I'm just going to bring this to my favorite part of all of it, is we pick the people who make the decisions at every single level, from school board up until the President of the United States of America. And I did this great little graphic, I'm going to give a plug for it. It's on the Texas Educators Vote website, called Who Does What? Just in public education. And you can look by elected position and you can look by issue. And then, so the model for Texas Educators Vote, we don't tell people who to vote. We don't endorse candidates or parties or measures or anything else. But you figure out who does what, you research people you can vote on, and you pick the people who align with you. And I really think people don't vote because they don't understand how it relates to their everyday life. Yeah. So to me, there are two parts of engagement: picking the people, and then whether you get who you picked or didn't, you engage with them. Right? I had a school board candidate who I hadn't supported. I had supported someone else. The day that person was elected, I called them. I talked to them about my school. I invited them to things. So you engage in the electoral process, and then you engage with the elected officials. And then if you don't like how they're doing, you run, or you get someone else to run. It's like a continuous circle. And And once you connect it to your everyday life, whether it's education or something else, I think that's how we're going to get people out and be more engaged in their democracy, which to me is by far the most important thing.
Yeah, I'm glad you made that segue, because I wanted to ask you, how do you think we get more diverse candidates to run? Because I think a lot of people don't vote because they don't see themselves in the candidates. And I'll speak from experience. I ran for state representative for House District 51, and we were a little bit of an anomaly because there were 7 of us running. So there was quite a variety to pick from, lots of diversity. I think it was great that so many of us threw our hat in the rings. But we were the biggest race, by the way, for state representative in the state. But normally it's 1, 2. A lot of people are discouraged. It's not your turn. Don't run. I mean, how do we get people to take that plunge and encourage them that you should run?
Well, I mean, I appreciate your running. And I think for one is we have this part-time legislature. We have unpaid school board members. Like, if you need to have a job and you need to like feed your children or have a shelter, you probably can't go spend all your time running for something. And so we've got this 5 months of every 2 years that people are in the legislature and school board. I mean, it's crazy the amount of money you have to raise. It's crazy the amount of time, and it limits who can run. And it also limits, I think, how good a job people can do. Like, if you're in the legislature and you also like run a business, like in my international trade policy, I did work, like I covered some Central American countries. I'm just gonna give an example. And when I was covering Costa Rica, we were noticing that they were protecting ornamental plants. So we would go have our negotiations with their foreign trade minister. And I'm like, why are they doing that? Well, they had a part-time legislature, and the guy who was their foreign trade minister had an ornamental plant company. I feel like we see that in our legislature sometime. So if you really want to have a broad range of people who can run, and a broad range of people, and have them actually listen and do what's right for the community, they can't have to also like go make money doing something else. So there's that. And I also just think, just on public education, I just want to make a shout out. Like, I think the most important thing is to look and see like what voices are missing. And to me, the voices are missing are the students. Mm-hmm. No one is listening to the students. They're wise. They're living this. They're hiding under desks, practicing getting slaughtered. They're watching their friends take their lives. They're doing stupid, mind-numbing test prep. Like, I just think the number one question for any time there's policy making being done is like, who is this policy going to affect, and why are they not sitting here advising us?
Ooh, amen.
So should we be advocating for state representatives to make a livable wage, and school board members and SBOE? I mean, I'm blown away that some of these people make $0. $0 for all the work they do. And like you're saying, they still have to fundraise and ask other people for money.
Well, the answer to who can do that is very, very clear.
Excuse the age, the race, the income. It perpetuates our inequities. And I think it's hard to make change until you change that a little bit.
Yeah. And I can't believe I find myself wanting to offer grace. But I think what I am recognizing is that sometimes I'm so quick to jump into these things and just basically breathe fire because I'm so frustrated. But it occurred to me that, that's based on an old tradition. That's a model that it doesn't fit where we are today. And so I think we need a hard look at a tradition that doesn't fit, right? The tradition of who can afford to do public service, and that is sort of your duty as a, almost like a thank you for the gifts that you've been given, and yada, yada, yada. But that is not, I believe that's not a model that fits where we are now.
I'll add one thing to that is because of the nature of our legislature, not only through all of these groups did we have to educate the general public, we had to educate the legislature. Right? Like, they don't have time or the background to know everything about everything. So when we would go in, whatever the topic was, and say, hey, thank you so much for talking about funding, but did you know that it would cost $44 billion to be average? I had legislators come out and be like, what? what? Hold on. And you show them the data and they're like, oh, I had no idea. They thought they were just doing something great and that it was going to be fixed. So it makes the advocate even more important, and to talk to every single person and to really be a resource for staffers, for legislators, for everyone, because time and knowledge is short. You know what I mean? Like, you need to, if you can help people be better at their jobs, which are hard and unfunded, then, and the same at every level, same with school board, the same with the super, I just think engaging at every level and wherever you have any expertise, being willing to provide that, that's part of a society and part of civic engagement.
Yeah. You're already touching this, but what have you found that's been successful in your advocacy work? Has it been getting really simple to understand one sheets, or how do you break through if you have 5 minutes with them to get your point across quickly?
I think the one pager with bullets is really good. I think people have, quick. I mean, if it's there's going to be a hearing and a vote, you go talk to people in the halls. I think it's making pals with staffers and texting them during the hearing. I've been successful when we were hearing that, Texas wasn't sending any of the federal dollars along. I would tweet directly and tag the legislators that were asking questions at a hearing. I would send a message, like whatever method that you think people are listening, you get it out there, because you just need their attention. And legislators are often on Twitter, as are their staffs. People, I think, teachers used to be more on Facebook. Now it seems a little more Instagram. Whatever you can do to be a resource and to know how you can get somebody's attention politely and respectfully. And what's been most successful is when we've met with people in any of these, we've said, look, we come in peace. We are here to help you. We are here to provide information. And if you have legislation that is good, we have an army of people who can come and testify for your legislation and provide backup for you. But if you're going to do stuff that's bad, you're going to hear from us too.
Fair.
Yeah.
Very fair.
I mean, right?
That's the job.
But
Can you
knowing
tell-
your stuff, I think just be educating yourself and being knowledgeable.
Can you tell us about a moment when you were surprised by a reaction from an elected official or a staffer, someone that you thought, like, we're not going to get this person, but here we are, let's try anyway? Did you have any of those moments recently? I hope.
Yes. I think people are looking for common ground. I think I have found the House to generally be more responsive to people. They're closer to their community, and the Senate isn't. And I'm not going to give a specific name, but a senator that was just won an election in an extremely conservative race, and it is from a spot that I don't think they're likely to support public ed. They sat with public ed advocates for 3 hours and said, where can we come together? Where can we save money? Where can we cut out, bureaucracy? They're not going to agree on all the same stuff, but there were some areas of overlap. And to me, it's the same as when there was a school board member elected who I knew I wasn't going to agree with, but they would listen. They would listen and look for something that they could overlap with and support. I think we need more of that because, we can't really get further apart on most things. But public ed is the one thing that has brought together sides that generally have been on opposite sides, but sadly, public ed's been weaponized politically nationwide, and I hope we can bridge that in the state of Texas, but it all depends on how many people are willing to participate in elections and at during sessions.
Yes, I have some last thoughts, but Nichole, do you have any burning questions?
Well, I would love for you to talk about advocacy. I guess even just a little bit more. You're so you have such a policy background that I think I, as an average person, find myself like, oh, but what could I do? So I think I'd love for you to kind of break it down, like just really, I guess, small steps, that anybody could do.
So I would say, like, right now, it's a couple months before an election. I would say you look and see who's running for whatever it is in your area. Go to like Vote 411, which is the League of Women Voters, and it'll tell you who you vote for, and listen to candidate forums, whether it's city council or county or the legislature. Think about what's most important to you. Reach out to them and say, hey, this is my, I care about whatever it is. I care about if my kid's going to get shot at school. I care about the planet imploding. I care about, maybe you care about keeping your gun, whatever it is. Maybe you don't want to pay taxes. I don't know what it is. Whatever your issue is, you talk to all the candidates. They come to your door. Talk to them. I've invited, I have 5 city council candidates. I've had 3 of them come to my door. I ask them questions. I say, this is important to me. Tell me how you're different. Just asking and listening if there's a forum, reading the newspaper, and looking at, the groups that you like, who they support, and groups that you disagree with, who they support. So that's the basic part with that. But then engaging wherever it is. Is it your church? Is it your temple? Is it your school board? Just sort of keeping a pulse. And if there's something that you care about, because there's gotta be something that everybody cares about, getting involved at whatever level.
Yeah. And I want to throw out something else too that is underlying all of this, which is just the belief that you have the right to say what you care about, and you have the right to ask questions. And I think that it's very easy to feel overwhelmed and overlooked, and to think that you don't have those rights.
I think that is like the most important thing. And to be more specific, you could go to a meeting, you could get on a Zoom, you could send an email, you could make a phone call, you could send a tweet, you could, there's simple, quick ways. And if you don't have the time to do it on your own, join a group that talks about whatever you care about the most. They will send you simple ways that you can send a simple email. Personal stories is what makes a difference. I saw at the legislature when a parent would come in and say, my kid has a scholarship, they're a brilliant physics student, but they're dyslexic and they're having a hard time on this reading test. And they got a scholarship for this, that, or the other thing, but they can't graduate from high school. Stories, that's what people remember when there's too much information coming at them. Mm-hmm. Just a human story, a kind human story, and treat people with respect. But I think they want to hear your stories, most people. And if they don't, then pick somebody else. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah, I love that. So don't underestimate the power of storytelling, especially if you do it in a kind way, in a respectful way, and from the heart. Sounds like it's very powerful for a lot of these folks who are in positions of power. The last thing I want to ask you about is regarding public education. As we've touched on, there's so much to keep tabs on, so many different elected officials who are connected to public education. What's maybe the 1 or 2 things that you really recommend parents pay attention to, or that they could do to have a positive impact on their students' educational experience?
That's big. I think parents, in today's day and age, everybody's busy. Teachers are busy, parents are busy. I think, as a parent, the most important thing I did was listen to my kids. The most important thing that I did was try to see who they were. I start to cry. What their strengths were, what motivated them. I have 3 kids. They're all motivated differently. They're all good at different stuff. And what impact is impacting them negatively. Be their advocate. Be their advocate with their teacher. Be their advocate with your school district. And when I see the same thing working badly for all of those kids, and know that my kids had every possible advantage, speaking up for not your kids, going into another part of town and seeing what is happening. I know my kids were getting killed off with the stupid kill and drill, but across town, they were losing recess. They were losing electives. They were losing anything meaningful and further perpetuated. So to me, again, it's listening and understanding how to be their champion. And to me, if you could be your own kid's champion and maybe just pick one other kid to bring along, because not every kid has a parent who has the time or the confidence, having dealt with that culturally. They may not be comfortable with the language. They may come from a culture where you don't engage at that level. And I don't know, to me, I think kids, again, they're wise till we beat it out of them. So if we could listen to them and find a way to empower kids who aren't voters yet, but will be voters, I think it would make public education be much more responsive to their needs and to the teacher and teachers too, you know.
Yeah, I really love that. It's making me think about a cousin of mine who graduated from UT not that long ago. And when I was running, I was like, I'm going to run. And he was like, most people were excited about it. Like, wow, that's so brave. Cool. And he was like, oh, okay. He's like, I don't like voting's not really for me. I don't know. And I don't really participate. And that hurt because it's making me think maybe he felt like a kid that wasn't listened to when he was younger in school. So like, why would anyone listen to him now if they were elected? Like, just, it feels like intentional, maybe kind of beating them down so that they just sit back, don't worry about this. But if we can empower them and let them know that, no, really, we do want to know your priorities, just giving them more power back and letting them know that they are citizens and they should be a part of this because we need them. We need their voices because they have so much to teach us back.
They also don't necessarily see everything in the binary way that we do. You know, we were raised that, you know, it's this or that in everything. And so there are two parties. We say there are two, like all the things I have learned from my children, that there is a continuum in just about everything. And were we to leave it to the next generation, which is one reason why some people don't want young people to engage, right? People resist change if it's working for them. But I really think that if we could get out of the way, I think there is wisdom that would emerge. And can I give you just one other example?
Yes.
I was at the farmer's market with my youngest about a year ago, and there was a young man who wanted us to sign something. It was on animal rights or whatever it was. And I was like, okay, it's hot, but fine, we'll stop, we'll talk to him. He's like, sign my thing. And he said, did you know Texas is the worst? Our governor's really bad on this issue. And I was like, okay. I'm not that surprised, but that's fine. I said, and so I kind of said, I turned it around and said, well, you vote, right? And he said, well, and I said, well, are you registered to vote? And he's like, well, no. I said, you know, this form you're having people fill out, you're going to have to hand it to someone. And if you hand it to someone who agrees with you, they're likely to turn it into a policy. But if you turn it into someone who you're already telling me does not agree with you, they're unlikely to do anything. So really the power of what you're doing is to have elected officials who agree with you. And so my daughter's like, oh, Mom, you're teaching about voting. You've really, poor kid, got an earful. And I said, right. And he said, you know what? I voted once. It didn't really work out for me. And I think a lot of people get that message. And so to me, that's where there is a culture. Like, you don't win every race, but you engage, and then you engage with the people you disagree with, and you help them understand why they might be misguided. Provide them with information. I mean, I just think we need to not do it like reach out to people the day it's time to vote.
Yeah.
So that was upsetting, but that was like a cautionary tale to me. I think there's a lot of that.
Yeah, definitely the relationship building, which is long term, which is hard because there's a lot of work involved, but the work is worth it, is what I'm hearing in this conversation and some of our other conversations.
Well, and it's so much more sustaining, right? Like if your response is to then withdraw and just be kind of mad and sad, right? That does not appeal to me. I would much rather stay engaged, be hopeful, believe that my voice matters. Like, that's going to sustain me over time.
I just will say one positive thing, because I think I've said a lot of negative things. I really think people, like more now than ever, need community. And all of these are opportunities for community. They're opportunities to connect around what is important to you, to learn from other people, to empower yourself and others. Like, civic engagement and democracy is about the public square. And maybe if we can frame it that way, that you can get something out of this connection, maybe it will be more enticing.
That's awesome.
Yes, well said. Nichole and I are also hoping through this podcast that it will be a place for people to find community and to reach out to us and for us to continue the conversation off the podcast, because like you're saying, I also very much believe that we're starved for community, and we're either staying lonely or we're finding it in places that maybe aren't as healthy, but we take that because we want those relationships. So I'm glad you mentioned that. But we'll wrap up with something that is hopefully a little bit lighter, a little more fun. It's our last segment called Attention Mentions, where we just mention something that has our attention right now. So it can be a book or a movie or an article or an experience you had, something that's just been bubbling up in your mind over the last few days. So Nichole, do you have anything, or do you have anything, Laura, top of mind? Or you want to...
I don't have to go first, but I can go first. Well, I was like, I'm smiling, but then I remember like actually what it is. Well, okay. It was Leave No Trace, a documentary. Yeah, it was just a feature-length documentary that is available on Hulu, and it's about the Boy Scouts. But it was incredibly well done because they talked about the sexual abuse of boys that took place and the system that allowed it to continue for so long. But what I really appreciated, and I'm going to imagine that if I had been a Boy Scout, I would appreciate this about the documentary, is that they never de-emphasize, I guess, the value that Boy Scouts did provide to so many people. And so they really emphasized how they're trying to keep the value and what it offers in terms of, outdoor education and leadership and the values that are baked into the core of the message, and separate that from the harm that has been done. So anyway, Leave No Trace on Hulu. Really well done. Nice.
Me too. We always need more stuff to watch.
I know. Okay, I'll share. Laura, I think you might like this. So it's a podcast that I'm going to recommend. It's called Now and Then, and the two hosts are historians. It's Heather Cox Richardson and Joanne Freeman, and their episode this week was titled, Does Anyone Love Taxes? So they talk about the history of taxes in the United States, and the idea, like, what are taxes for? Is it to pay for our services? Is it to feel like we're part of our country? Just this interesting idea about the way our money is more than just paying for things, but also like buy-in to our government. So very fascinating. These women are so smart. I love their podcast, Now and Then.
Nice. I'm going to listen to that. And I thought of something too. I had a few different ideas. I've been reading a lot of books like about librarians because I think it's tough to be a librarian these days, but I can't remember the names of those books. But so what I was going to mention was there's a show we've been watching. It may be on Netflix now. I think it may be on Showtime. It's the First Lady or First Ladies, but it's a series, and it highlights Eleanor Roosevelt, Betty Ford, and Michelle Obama. And it really shows a lot of the things that their husbands got credit for doing that really the husbands didn't want to do, that these women found a way to get done. And it's really, it's uplifting. It's also irritating like everything else, because I walk away saying those women should have been president, right? Because they did all these great things. Mm-hmm. But it's fascinating, and especially Betty Ford, who is Michelle Pfeiffer, and she's just awesome. And I didn't know anything about Betty Ford, but it's fascinating. And we've got a few more episodes of that to watch. I have to, space them out because I do get aggravated sometimes. But it's really good, and it's well acted, and it's interesting, and it just gives even more evidence that we should have more women making important decisions at every level of government. So
that's great. I'm going to check that out.
That's really great. Yeah.
And I'll figure out the exact title, but it's like The First Lady, First Ladies, something like that.
Okay, yeah, well, we'll put that in our show notes so folks can go find it. But thank you so much for sharing all this information and all the advocacy that you do. We really appreciate that that you're so dedicated to these causes, because we need people to educate us, to educate our elected representatives, because as you're saying, it's a lot to parse through, and it's so encouraging to know that you are doing that. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you, well, and thanks for doing this, and thanks for inviting me.
Yes, of course.
Thank you, everybody, for joining me, Nichole Abshire, and my co-host, Claire Campos O'Neill, on Go Behind the Ballot. Hopefully, we've demystified some little portion of Texas politics, and we hope that you'll do more with us. Check out our website at www.gobehindtheballot.com, where you'll find links to all of our social media, and you will find our community. Let's join together and do more. We hope you'll let us know what is working, and we hope you'll join us next week. Thanks, everybody, and have a good one.